Underclass: The Quiet Desperation of Formerly Incarcerated Individuals. Written by Tyler Hart, CSU Chico, Sociology 441, Spring 2020, Dr. Tanya Lindsay. So, who exactly are formerly incarcerated individuals? Can you describe what one looks like? I can. Go take a look in the mirror and come back and tell me what you see. That's right, they look just like you. Formerly incarcerated individuals are our neighbors, brothers, sisters, everyday people just like us. Formerly incarcerated individuals are too often regarded as anomalies, as though they are from another world or something, as if the people who have been convicted of a crime are the only ones who've ever broken the law at some point in their lives. As a side note, let us be reminded that the law is an ever-changing social construct, too often used by the ruling elite to relegate already disadvantaged populations to an even lesser position within the socioeconomic framework. And you can call that liberal rhetoric if you want to, but as my grandma used to say, all that saying doesn't make it so. The fact is that in this country, you are really more likely to be detained and incarcerated if you are a minority, mentally ill, or poor. Check the history pages and find out how laws like loitering came to be. The point that I'm making is it's easier for some people to break the law than it is for others. But as soon as anyone breaks the law, they become a criminal, convict, inmate, prisoner, crook, jailbird, or a felon, and a myriad of other potentially crippling labels. That certainly looks different than when I described formerly incarcerated individuals as your brother or sister, doesn't it? While we must uphold the law in order to preserve our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we must ensure justice for every one of our countrymen and women. That means both the plaintiff and the defendant. Our societal shaming and legalized discrimination of formerly incarcerated individuals is not going to restore anything in these men and women, and consequently, there will be no restoration to the community to which the debt is truly owed. We as a people need to allow these formerly incarcerated men and women to leave their chains with the chain gang if we can ever expect them to live lives full of meaning and contribution. I mean, we want them to live lives full of meaning and contribution, don't we? They are, after all, our neighbors, brothers, and sisters. We could choose to be a nation that extends care, compassion, and concern to those who are locked up and locked out or headed for prison before they're old enough to vote. We could seek for them the same opportunities we seek for our own children. We could treat them like one of us. We could do that, or we can choose to be a nation that shames and blames its most vulnerable, affixes badges of dishonor upon them at young ages, and then relegates them to a permanent second class status for life. That is the path we have chosen, and it leads to a familiar place. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. I thank Michelle Alexander for having so eloquently articulated the horrors of the U.S. prison system. Not because I like to hear scary stories, but some realities need to be exposed so that they won't persist to wreak havoc in countless lives behind the obscurity of courtrooms, confinement, and community corrections. She posits a grim reality for our consideration here, but for those who are familiar with the nuanced mechanism that is the U.S. prison system and the corresponding social subjugation that it perpetuates, it is a tale all too familiar. It is no secret that the jails are filled to the brim with people of minority races and ethnicities. This has long been regarded as a truism among casual conversations of criminal justice. Let us be reminded of the words of the late philosopher Tupac Shakur. It ain't a secret, don't conceal the fact. The penitentiary is packed and is filled with blacks. Well, it's also filled with other minority groups, along with the poor and the mentally ill. Can't forget about them. The prison industrial complex is often inaccurately represented to the public as filling a role akin to St. Christopher, the patron saint of repentant thieves, to lead those who have strayed from the path of righteousness to a path of rehabilitation and, in theory, absolution from their violations of the dominant social order. Unfortunately, this is little more than a comforting story to tell little Susie when she asks where Daddy went. Let us not tell Susie that grown up time out is much different than that. In actuality, prison too often ensnares the already vulnerable populations. The poor, homeless addict that steals a slice of pizza to calm the wrenching of his empty gut gets a sentence that exceeds his life expectancy. The teenage boy who grew up on the west side of town without any social capital or positive role models takes a liking to the only successful individuals that he ever sees, the robbers and the dealers. All of his potential is wasted on calculating the return of investment on an ounce of cocaine instead of shares of Apple stock. The boy's mother leaves him alone with her gang member boyfriend who sexually assaults him. The high rates of gun violence outside his home tell him that this is an acceptable way to respond to trauma. The boy shoots his mom's boyfriend and is sentenced to life at the age of 17. The scenarios are endless. Take a look at who's actually in prison. The majority of people in prisons have been victimized and traumatized at some point in their lives. In prison, the supposed cure in many cases becomes another force that does little more than re victimize and re traumatize them. Upon release from prison, formerly incarcerated individuals quickly find that their jail or prison sentence actually extends much further than they imagined. Their new freedom is devalued upon confronting their new status in society, the dreaded ex-con. They no longer enjoy the same protection of their inherent civil liberties. For them, it's a whole new America. After their release from the Department of Corrections, they become a file on the desk of the Community Corrections personnel. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, there were approximately 5 million people on parole or probation in the U.S. in the year 2016. That is 5 million Americans with a permanently affixed and societally permissible second class status. This subjects reentering men and women to inordinately adversarial conditions with which they must contend for mere survival. Formerly incarcerated individuals leave prison with one foot still in the cell and another on a banana peel, the banana peel representing their precarious position within the societal framework. No rights, no job, no support, and the ever present threat of reincarceration by community corrections personnel. It has been reported that rearrests made for simple technical violations of post release supervision, like parole or probation, can at times account for as much as half of all new arrests. For those reentering men and women that successfully appease the whims of their assigned parole or probation agent and comply with all of the other terms and conditions of their supervision, they then carry all of their pre and post prison trauma with them to their communities, where they struggle to readjust to normal. The economic necessity of employment also presents a challenge to these formerly incarcerated individuals. This means that after having been warehoused under the most abhorrent conditions, called by a state given number instead of their birth names, socialized to believe they were nobodies, and given a laughable amount of treatment and training, formerly incarcerated individuals are expected to immediately return to their role as a cog in the wheel of the very social system that has all but crippled their ability to survive, much less return to their old social status. Studies have shown that it is more or less expected that a man or woman with a criminal record will earn less money over the course of their lifetime than will a man or woman without a criminal record. The life of the formerly incarcerated individual is a life as a member of an underclass, a specific group of people that are legally discriminated against. As a society, we must wholly absolve those men and women that have truly repaid their debts and made amends for their wrongdoings. It is our responsibility to see to it that the criminal justice system renders justice for all. If the criminal justice system is allowed to continue unabated in subjugating the masses for the benefit of the elite minority, the underlying social ills of which crime is a symptom will only be further exacerbated, increasing the divide between the rich and the poor, and leaving a common definition of humanity to hang in the balance.